This video presents breathtaking ancient discoveries that have astounded scientists. Unearthed through archaeological excavations, underwater expeditions, and the unbridled passion of amateurs alike. These findings have enraptured the research community with their immense magnitude and profound significance. The enigma of the Wailing Mummies. In 1886, Gaston Maspero, a renowned French scientist, was conducting his customary duties at the museum, delicately removing mummies from their sarcophagi and meticulously scrutinizing them whilst taking meticulous notes. Nonetheless, the contents of one particular sarcophagus left even this seasoned scholar dumbfounded. Upon initial inspection, the sarcophagus appeared to be entirely ordinary in nature. However, it was precisely this mundane quality that piqued Gaston's interest. Typically reserved for Egyptian pharaohs and other notable figures, burial boxes were adorned with inscriptions indicating the identity of their occupants. In contrast, the sarcophagus that caught Gaston's attention lacked any such markings. Adding to its enigmatic nature was the fact that the body within had been wrapped in a sheepskin, an impure material according to ancient Egyptian beliefs. Gaston Maspero unwrapped the mummy and discovered that its legs and arms were bound for an unknown reason. Looking at the mummy's head, he found that its face was frozen in a screaming expression with an open mouth due to the peculiar wrapping of the hands and the tortured expression on the face. Experts speculated that the person had been poisoned or possibly subjected to torture before death. However, the details only became clear after some time. In the course of further research, scientists discovered several similar remains and found that the screaming face was not linked to the mummified person's agonizing death. If the jaw was not intentionally fixed during the mummification process, it naturally opened during decomposition, forming the so-called scream. Thus, the frightening appearance of mummies with an intimidating facial expression now has a quite logical explanation, unrelated to mysticism. Beheaded skeletons. During archaeological excavations in the province of York, England, several skeletons were discovered, all belonging to men around the age of 45. This finding would not be so surprising if it weren't for one crucial detail. All the skeletons were headless. The skulls were either entirely absent or located around the chest or even at the feet of the skeletons. In the course of further investigation, scientists determined that all the burials could be traced back to the 2nd to 4th centuries AD, when this area was part of the Northern Roman Empire. Since most of the skeletons were unusually tall and showed signs of trauma, scientists logically speculated that the bones might belong to gladiators. Genetic analysis of 7 beheaded skeletons revealed that the majority were of British origin, while one possibly originated from the Middle East. The high number of injuries, along with the absence of skulls, may indicate that the remains belong to military personnel. However, there is still no exact answer to why the skeletons were beheaded. If you are interested in videos featuring fascinating discoveries, don't forget to share your opinion. Subscribe, like, activate notifications, and be sure to share your comments. The Witch Hunt. Frightening archaeological discoveries can be associated not only with bones and skulls. In a 15th century church in Aberdeen, Scotland, an intriguing artifact is preserved. In the chapel stands a stone column with an iron ring protruding from it. This ring was possibly used to restrain accused witches in the late 16th century. During that time, Aberdeen and the broader territory of Scotland experienced a series of witch trials known as the Great Witch Hunt. Approximately 400 people were brought to trial, and around 200 individuals were executed, all within the span of a year. The deaths were gruesome, with many of the condemned being burned at the stake. It is evident that many of those accused were not actual witches and did not even attempt to be. Historians still debate the true reasons behind the outbreak of witch hunts during that period. Expedition to the Arctic Ocean. In the mid-19th century, the English physician and explorer Ray John explored the Canadian coast of the Arctic Ocean. During his journey, he interacted with the Inuit people, who shared horrifying stories about a lost expedition whose members perished in those areas. According to the Inuit, the members of that expedition went mad and even resorted to cannibalism. The remains of the expedition members were discovered over 100 years later in the 1980s, and only then was it definitively determined to whom these remains belonged. In the 19th century, many sailors were puzzled by the search for the legendary Northwest Passage, a route from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific through the Arctic. The quest for the legendary Northwest Passage claimed many lives, including the lives of 129 explorers who set out in 1845 to find a sea route through the Arctic, led by Admiral John Franklin. In the end, the operation failed, and all crew members perished from hunger, scurvy, and exposure. Traces of lead poisoning were found on many remains, likely due to the consumption of poorly preserved food. A high level of lead in the body can cause vomiting, weakness, and seizures, making the deaths of many crew members truly agonizing. Not all travelers were properly buried, and the condition of some remains indeed confirmed the occurrence of cannibalism among the expedition members. Remains of Vikings without heads. Archaeologists were conducting excavations on the side of an old road in the Dorset area, United Kingdom, when they unexpectedly stumbled upon something truly terrifying: a mass grave containing the remains of 54 Vikings, and all of them were decapitated. Scientists began their analysis by meticulously documenting the position of the bones, and at that moment they noticed peculiarities in their arrangement. Specifically, the bones of the legs and arms, heads, and torsos were neatly arranged in separate piles. So, what happened? One theory among archaeologists suggested that after the Vikings were captured by the villagers of the local community, who somehow survived the Viking raid, the attackers were executed, and then the victors buried the Vikings in this manner. However, this hypothesis did not explain why the unfortunate Vikings were beheaded with precise and unusual sword strikes from the front. If it were an execution, the sword strikes would have been delivered from behind. In reality, the archaeologists later revised their theory, speculating that such an event might have occurred due to the Vikings falling victim to some unusual ritual of sacrifice. However, there are no mentions of such rituals being common in that region at the time, so the actual reason for this mass burial is yet to be discovered. Remains of Moa in New Zealand cave. In the 1980s, an expedition explored mountain caves in New Zealand and found something resembling a dinosaur's leg. It turned out to be a leg with bones belonging to the extinct, non-flying bird named Moa. Approximately 800 years ago, Moa became extinct in New Zealand, primarily due to human intervention. However, they had inhabited the Earth for millions of years before their extinction. According to scientists' estimates, the ancient Moa appeared over 15 million years ago. This particular discovery, found in a cave dating back over 3,000 years, has been remarkably well preserved. By the way, Moa is the only species of birds that completely lacked wings. Ancient human sacrifice. Archaeologists worldwide have found evidence of human sacrifices, but one example discovered in 2008 appears particularly peculiar. In an ancient building in present-day Syria, archaeologists found strangely arranged human and animal bones. 3 human skeletons lay side by side, and based on unusual skeletal damage and other details, researchers identified one of the skeletons as a possible ancient acrobat. Scientists carefully studied this discovery and hypothesized that the remains belonged to a group of ancient performers who were sacrificed to halt a natural disaster. Perhaps the fact that the victims were known figures of their time led their contemporaries to believe that their sacrifice would be maximally effective. Neanderthals and cannibalism. In 2010, researchers reported the discovery of a Neanderthal family's skeletons in a cave in Spain. But what makes this finding particularly terrifying is the evidence of cannibalism. Most likely, the Neanderthals whose remains were found became victims of another group of Neanderthals. Archaeologists believe that instances of cannibalism occurred among Neanderthals during challenging periods. However, all of this took place before humans inhabited the territory. While Neanderthals belong to the human species, they are not our direct ancestors. Despite having larger skulls and brain sizes than modern humans, their cognitive abilities were significantly lower. Ancient chemical warfare. The term chemical warfare is usually associated with conflicts of the last century. However, archaeologists have found remains of soldiers who fell victim to this type of weaponry 2,000 years ago. During the siege of a city in Syria, which was under Roman control at that time, Persian soldiers dug tunnels beneath the city walls, intending to use the tunnel to undermine the walls. Romans counteracted by excavating their own tunnels to intercept the Persians, but the Persians heard their approach. Some archaeologists believe that the Persians set a deadly trap, a cloud of poisonous chemical smoke that literally dissolved the lungs of the victims. The positioning of the soldiers' remains supports this hypothesis. While it was known that ancient battles were exceptionally brutal, few could have anticipated just how brutal they truly were. The vampire history. We've already heard frightening stories related to witch hunts. However, about a century after the witch hunts, a period of vampire hunting began, a real history of Eastern European vampires that might be more terrifying than the fictional story of Dracula. In the 17th century, in the territory of Poland, some individuals were buried with sickles around their necks or stones placed in their mouths. These precautions were taken to prevent the dead from rising again as vampires, believed by locals to return to continue sucking blood. Later, it was discovered that some of these burials attributed to vampire practices had nothing to do with it. No injuries were found on the remains, and scientists concluded that the cause of death for these people was a cholera epidemic. The mystery of Yonaguni off the coast of Japan. The mysterious Yonaguni monument was discovered at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean near Japan. It all happened by chance in the mid-1980s when a diving enthusiast was diving to watch sharks. In the end, he came across an unusual structure in the depths, similar to a massive step pyramid. After the discovery of this place, it was immediately dubbed Japanese Atlantis, and scientists began to study it. It turned out that the height of this underwater structure is 25 meters. There are two main versions of the formation of this object. Many scientists consider this to be a natural formation, taking into account the seismic activity of the area, which could have caused the formation of such forms. However, other researchers are confident that only humans could create such precise geometric shapes. One way or another, research continues, but both sides agree that the age of this object is more than 10,000 years. The mystery of ancient swords with the mysterious inscription Ulfberht. In different European countries, including Russia, archaeologists have discovered ancient swords, united by the mysterious Latin inscription Ulfberht. Scientists have determined that these swords date back to the 9th or 11th centuries. Most of them were of high quality for that time. However, the meaning of this mysterious inscription still remains unclear. There are several versions of this inscription, but there is no clear answer to the question of what it means. One version suggests that almost 1,000 years ago in Northern Europe, there was a family blacksmith shop named Ulfberht. They made high-quality swords and successfully sold them in various territories in large quantities. Over time, unscrupulous businessmen began to produce counterfeit swords with the inscription Ulfberht, but of much lower quality. This explains why swords with this inscription are sometimes found, but their quality is significantly inferior. This can be compared to modern fakes. If you have ever come across similar fakes, please give it a like. Whale rocks in Thailand. Whale rocks in Thailand have recently attracted attention. They got their name because they resemble several whales. However, the main question is how the rocks could have acquired this shape. There is a theory that this place has existed for more than 75 million years, but it did not always look like this. Perhaps over millions of years, sediments have worn away the rocks, giving this place a resemblance to whales. One way or another, this place is gradually becoming quite popular among tourists. Mysterious stone spheres of Costa Rica. These strange spherical stone objects were found on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica almost 100 years ago. Currently, about 300 spheres of varying sizes have been discovered, some weighing up to 16 tons. According to rough estimates, the age of the spheres is 3,000 years. As in the case of the Yonaguni monument, there are two points of view on the origin of this phenomenon: natural and man-made. In the first case, such forms could have been formed under prolonged exposure to water, and in the second case, ancient tribes could have used these spheres to designate celestial bodies or delineate boundaries. None of the versions has yet been conclusively proven. Nazca Lines, mysterious geoglyphs. Mysterious drawings in the Nazca Desert have attracted the attention of researchers since the beginning of the 20th century. Pilots flying over the Nazca Desert in Peru began to notice strange patterns on the ground, such as drawings of a falcon, a spider, a monkey, or even a humanoid figure resembling an alien. What makes these images even more amazing is their enormous size, tens and hundreds of meters in length. It was almost impossible to observe them from the ground. They could only be seen from a bird's eye view. Numerous archaeological studies have been conducted in the Nazca Desert throughout the 20th century and beyond. Scientists agree that these images were created more than 1,000 years ago, which raises many questions. The purpose of these giant drawings, of which there are only 30, as well as hundreds of geometric shapes, remains unclear. There are various theories, including the version that the drawings served as guides for flying saucers, but such versions have not been officially confirmed. Scientists are also considering the possibility that the drawings are related to astronomy and outer space. In the 20th century, there was a popular point of view that the images were created by representatives of a vanished civilization. However, later research has cast doubt on this theory. Another unresolved issue is how to create such images. Specific climatic conditions helped preserve the drawings, but the lack of traces of the people who created these images raises questions. The various geometric shapes drawn in the desert may represent a language that has yet to be deciphered. Researchers hope that, in the near future, artificial intelligence will help solve these mysteries by analyzing huge amounts of data from the Nazca Desert. Please leave your guesses in the comments about what you think these giant drawings could be used for. Staffordshire hoard. In the summer of 2009, amateur treasure hunter Terry Herbert was walking through a field in Staffordshire, central England. The moment his metal detector started beeping to start digging, Terry was unable to do so because the land belonged to another farmer. After receiving his permission, excavations began at this site. What was discovered stunned all the scientists, treasure hunter Terry and the farmer who owned the land. This find will go down in history as the Staffordshire treasure. Thousands of objects made of gold, silver, and other precious metals, weapons, jewelry, and utensils were discovered. The treasure was valued at more than $4 million. Scientists later determined that everything found originally belonged to one of the ancient Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, buried around the 9th century, possibly due to Viking incursions into the area. More than 1,000 years later, Terry Herbert discovered this treasure. According to the law, half the value of the treasure went to the treasure hunter himself, and the other half to the farmer who owned the land. The artifacts can now be seen in the Birmingham City History Museum, Great Britain. Artifacts of the ancient Quimbaya civilization. One of the mysterious finds of archaeologists is the so-called figurines of the ancient Quimbaya civilization. These artifacts were found in what is now Colombia. The most notable are the jewelry figurines in the shape of airplanes. When you find out that they were created 2,000 years ago, this fact becomes truly amazing. They seem to have surpassed their time, leading some to believe they were inspired by aliens or even time travelers. The reason these theories cannot be completely dismissed is that if these figures were recreated to the size of a real flying object, they would theoretically be able to fly. However, most scientists are inclined to explain that the winged figurines of Quimbaya were stylized images of birds, reptiles, amphibians, flying fish, and insects typical of this region. Giant Olmec stone heads. In the 1930s, scientists discovered giant stone heads carved from rock in southern Mexico. All of them were huge and heavy. The most massive head had a length and width of 3 meters and weighed up to 40 tons. The main question that worried the researchers was who and why, and most importantly, how they managed to build these gigantic structures. It is now believed that the stone heads were created around 1,000 years BC and belonged to the ancient Olmec civilization. A total of 17 stone sculptures with a flat back and a frontal image of a face were discovered. However, the owners of these individuals remain unknown. These may have been prominent Olmec rulers. However, researchers still have unanswered questions, especially about how these giant heads were created. Huge stone slabs were taken from another place and moved a considerable distance to where the Olmecs lived. There, the faces of people were depicted on the stones, and it was in this place that archaeologists found the figures in the 20th century. How ancient people who lived thousands of years ago moved giant stones weighing several tons remains a mystery. Scientists have not yet found remains of any tools or technology, and it is unclear what tools the Olmecs used to carve faces. These and other questions remain to be resolved by researchers. Lost City of the Kalahari. This mystical site in the Kalahari Desert in Africa has been the subject of study and debate among both professional historians and enthusiasts for more than 100 years. At the end of the 19th century, explorer Guillermo Farini, during an expedition in Africa, discovered the ruins of an ancient city in the Kalahari Desert. He described destroyed structures made of large stone blocks. Later reports mentioned that an abandoned ship and even a quarry had been seen in this place. Naturally, theories about a lost ancient civilization began to arise. In the mid-20th century, stone formations matching Farini's descriptions were found. Many believed that this was the lost city of the Kalahari. However, later scientists came to the conclusion that the found stones were a natural formation, and man had nothing to do with them. However, the search for the lost city of the Kalahari continues to this day. Giant dinosaur tracks in Western Australia. In 2017, mysterious traces of a colossal creature were discovered in Western Australia. These prints were of an impressive size, large enough to accommodate an ordinary person, 1 meter 70 centimeters. Paleontologists studying the prints of ancient creatures that once inhabited this area initially did not pay attention to this mysterious find, mistaking the colossal prints for ordinary features of the landscape. It was eventually discovered that there were a significant number of these giant footprints in the area. At first, scientists had a hard time believing this discovery, as they thought that a creature with such impressive legs simply could not exist. During their research, scientists came to the conclusion that the footprints could belong to an unknown species of dinosaur that lived more than 100 million years ago. Apparently, they had to be over 5 meters tall to have footprints of that size. This means that a person could theoretically easily fit inside this creature. Research in Western Australia is ongoing. In addition to these giant tracks, scientists have discovered dozens of other types of tracks that promise many more interesting discoveries. The sunken Spanish galleon Nuestra Señora de Atocha. A treasure worth a few $1,000,000 is good, but treasures worth hundreds of millions of dollars are even better. In 1622, a Spanish royal ship named Nuestra Señora de Atocha set sail from the coast of Cuba towards Spain. In addition to a crew of 500 people, the ship transported an immense amount of gold and silver ingots. However, a sudden storm knocked the ship off course, and it sank off the coast of Florida. Of the 500 crew members, only 3 survived. The ship and the treasures disappeared without a trace. In the mid-1980s, amateur treasure hunter Mel Fisher finally discovered the missing ship. By that time, he had already spent several years searching for the galleon Nuestra Señora de Atocha, but all those years were generously rewarded, as the total value of the treasures found by Fisher was estimated at $450 million. Authorities in Florida tried to sue Fisher for a share of the money, but after a lengthy legal battle, the court ruled that Fisher owned all the treasures he found. Leave a like if you have ever found something in your life. If yes, then write a few words in the comments. It will be very interesting to read. Cuerdale, hoard. In the mid-19th century, workers were repairing the embankment in the village of Cuerdale in the United Kingdom. During the work, they came across a large chest containing many silver objects, including coins. It turned out to be the largest hoard ever belonging to the Vikings. The value of the find today is estimated at $3 million. How much did the workers get out of it, you might ask? Nothing, because the hoard was confiscated for the benefit of the British Crown. At best, the workers managed to swipe a few coins. Today, the Cuerdale hoard is in the British Museum and is believed by scientists to date back to the 10th century AD. Hoxne hoard. An even more astonishing story happened to a farmer named Peter Watling. In November 1992, in the English village of Hoxne, he lost a hammer while working in the field. To find it, Peter asked his friend for a metal detector and went in search of the tool. At that moment, the farmer could not even imagine what a discovery awaited him. Instead of the hammer, he found the largest hoard in the history of Britain at that time. In the early 90s, it consisted of jewelry and dishes, and most importantly, 15,000 coins made of gold and silver. According to scientists, all this wealth belonged to a very wealthy family around the 4th or 5th century AD, when this territory still belonged to the Roman Empire. As a result, after the evaluation, it was decided to pay Peter half the value of the found hoard, almost £2 million. This is still a lot of money today, and in the early 90s, it was simply enormous. The artifacts found by Peter can now be seen in the British Museum in London. By the way, on that lucky day, the farmer was able to find his hammer too, but I suppose he was much happier about the treasure. Panagyurishte treasure. The Panagyurishte treasure proved that valuable hoards can be found not only on the territory of Britain. In December 1949, 3 Dakov brothers from Bulgaria were working at a tile factory near the small town of Panagyurishte. When they went to dig clay, they came across a strange object resembling a whistle. The men took the find to their boss, and it turned out that the strange whistle was actually a ceremonial horn from the 4th century BC made of pure gold. Further excavations helped to discover pitchers, vases, and other utensils. Absolutely all items were made of gold. According to researchers' assumptions, the treasure in the 4th century BC belonged to the Thracians, a people living in the territory of modern Eastern Europe. Today, the Panagyurishte treasure is in the Historical Museum of Plovdiv and is considered priceless. Unfortunately, it is unclear whether the Daykov brothers managed to get anything for their incredible find. That's all for us. If you liked the video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to like and hit the bell. We will also be very happy to see your comment. Thank you for watching.